Hello everyone, I'm Ben Contreras and welcome to another episode of Ben Talks About, where I go ahead and talk about stuff that nobody's actually talking about anymore, and what better ways to do it than to release a video concerning my personal thoughts on um, Nintendo's E3 that they did this year, where they showcased all the different games that were coming out at the time. And again, I say at the time because again, this video is automatically outdated before I even started talking. But yeah, overall, I thought that Nintendo did a pretty good job at showcasing all the stuff they wanted to do. A lot of people like to make the joke that Nintendo had quote unquote saved E3 this year because a lot of the stuff that other companies were doing during the showcase weren't too overly exciting. Although to be honest, I kind of feel like that's a bit of a sort of a not necessarily fair argument, because what other people like aren't going to be the same as what other people might like. Although I'm pretty sure a majority of people can agree that a lot of the stuff concerning this year's E3 again wasn't as overly exciting as some people may have wanted it to be. So then lots of people like to think that Nintendo thought to themselves, they have to come up with something to really get their attention, which they no doubt did quite a number of times. So I think it might be best to go ahead and talk about all the stuff in the order of that they actually showcased everything, and what better way to do it than talk about a thing that lots of people have been looking forward to ever since they first got released, the most recent DLC character added to Nintendo's Super Smash Bros. Series for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate on the Nintendo Switch, and it is none other than the main character Kazuma from the well-known series Tekken, which I'm personally not too fond of the Tekken franchise. I mean, I have played one of the games, and I think it is relatively decent, and it's definitely a lot more different compared to other fighting games like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like they sort of had a bit of a missed opportunity to include, if they were to include a character from another fighting game series, I feel like they sort of did a bit of a missed opportunity for them to add one of the characters from Mortal Kombat into Smash Brothers. Not helped with the fact that this was during the time where the Mortal Kombat movie was still a thing, and you can actually go ahead and watch the video where I actually talked about that movie. But I feel like it would have been much more topical to add a character from that video game franchise rather than one from a series that hasn't had a new game since Tekken, I want to say Tekken 7, which was quite a number of years ago. Since then, and there haven't really been that much talk of the Tekken series since then, at least as far as I'm aware of. But overall, I thought they did a pretty decent trailer. They did a lot of different homages to the Tekken series, and I feel like they did a good job paying tribute to the game franchise, because despite me saying that I'm not necessarily too fond of the games, I do understand the sort of legacy that it has for fighting games as a whole. So I do understand why they chose them as their next fighting game representative. But again, I would like to eventually see if they are going to make a third one of these DLC lines of characters. I would like to see the next fighting game character be a Mortal Kombat character. But afterwards, they actually they announced a couple other things that were being released for the Nintendo Switch. Nothing overly exciting that I was personally excited for. That is until we saw the announcement of another not necessarily new game, but a sort of compilation style game, which was called Mario Party Superstars, which is a compilation of a bunch of different boards and mini games from the various Mario Party games, which is something that I feel like lots of people have been wanting, especially ever since the release of Mario Party: The Top 100 on the 3DS, because that game was sort of advertised as a sort of Mario Party All-Stars type of game, but they definitely paid attention more on the mini games than the boards, which is the main meat and potatoes of the Mario Party series. So it seems like this game is sort of a response to that, and it definitely looks really, really good. I'm not necessarily someone who's played a lot of the Mario Party games, but it has been something that I've been wanting to get into for quite a while now. I've seen lots and lots of gameplay videos of the different type of mini games and boards and the type of chaos that ensues when playing a game of Mario Party. Um, so I am definitely excited to see what comes out of that, and um, I do also want to say that it definitely looks like it also takes cues from the most recent Mario Party game, Super Mario Party, in terms of the overall art style, and I'm wondering if they're going to have, if this is going to be like something where they sort of update the gameplay to have more of the newer mechanics that the newest game on the Switch decided to use, or if this is going to be something where they do like a sort of straight up port of the different boards and mini games from the previous ones, and just add the better HD quality visuals. But only time will tell when it eventually gets released and we can actually see for ourselves what they do with it. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was actually a something that I think people got the most excited for during this whole direct, which is the announcement of a brand new Metroid game, which we hadn't seen since Metroid: Samus Returns for the Nintendo 3DS, which was a remake of Metroid 2: The Return of Samus, which was actually a remake which again wasn't necessarily a completely original game, even though it did add a ton of stuff to make it worthwhile, and is a game that I most definitely want to eventually get. Before this, though, the last console Metroid game that we had was Metroid Other M, all the way back on the Wii, when that was still new, which, lots of people didn't really think too fondly of that game, and still to this day, not many people think too fondly back to it. But this game right here, was sort of came out of nowhere, because we had no idea that something like this was going to be happening, or by like any sort of leaks or anything like that, as far as I know. But yeah, this game was announced, and it was given the title Metroid Dread, which I believe was actually a working title for a Metroid game that was in development for quite a while now, but then eventually got completely canceled when Nintendo realized they had nothing else that they could really do with the Metroid series, even though there is still plenty of stuff that they could do. But it looks like this game is sort of a combination of the Metroid: Samus Returns in terms of gameplay and graphics, but it also has the sort of atmosphere that Metroid Fusion sort of had throughout its game, as you were constantly being chased by the different parasites you would have to constantly escape from throughout the game, which is another game that I definitely want to eventually make a Let's Play on our channel. It was also very similar to the sections in Metroid Zero Mission after you lose your power suit and you have to go through that the space pirate temple area and like escape from all the different enemies that are trying to get you. It had a lot of vibes of that sort of thing. And it makes me wonder if this is going to be the type of Metroid game where it has that same sort of feel, and I feel like it is actually rather appropriate that the game is sort of handled like this, because with stuff like the Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 3 remake, I feel like the idea of this horror style game where you're constantly being chased by these different creatures was definitely a pretty cool idea. The only thing that I didn't really think too highly of was not necessarily the art style, but sort of the visuals. It felt like a lot of the stuff that they showcased was all in one major looking area, and it gave a lot of essence of Dead Space or Mass Effect, as that sort of overly clean, sort of sci-fi style to it. It didn't necessarily look like something super organic, or stuff that I would immediately think of when I think of the Metroid series. So I'm hoping that they add different environments to have that sort of feel, while also keeping that sort of sci-fi sort of horror style that they showed off in all the trailers. So yeah, I think by far out of all the things that they showed off, this is probably the thing that I was most excited for. Which so yeah, I'm most like definitely looking forward to that game when it comes out. Um, Afterwards, they announced a couple other games. Um, that wasn't too that wasn't like overly like interested in. Like a lot of stuff they were showcasing were pretty cool. Like the sequel to the Monster Hunter World game that they had on the 3DS, which was a sort of RPG spin-off of the Monster Hunter series, which was a game that I sort of had a bit of an interest in, but I never really took the time to actually try and play it. The another thing that they had announced was a new series in the in Atlus's Shin Megami Tensei franchise, which actually was pretty good. Was pretty good. It has a lot of like the environments in that one looked really interesting, especially from the stuff that I've seen of the SMT series. However, I'm the kind of person who, right now, the only game in the Shin Megami Tensei series that I'm necessarily familiar with are Personas 4 and 5, as well as one of the other games that they made on the 3DS. But overall, I couldn't help but constantly think to myself that the art style kind of reminded me of Fire Emblem Three Houses, as that sort of like 3D um, sort of anime kind of art style without actually being like an anime kind of art style. A lot of 3D games that have that same sort of like 3D done to them, to me just always looks like they belong in like Fire Emblem Three Houses or something like that. But that's just a personal thing for me. But the Shin Megami Tensei series is definitely a series that I would eventually want to get into. But like a lot of other franchises, it's a very long and intensive sort of series with a lot of different like mythologies and themes going on around it. Another game that they actually announced was not necessarily a new game, but it was another sort of compilation game, which is a compilation of all of the Danganronpa series, which is a franchise that I haven't talked about at all during for this entire channel. These games are definitely seem like something that has like an interesting idea of it, but it's the kind of game where I feel like I personally would not be very great at it. I haven't necessarily been very good at these sort of like interrogation sort of detective style games. You can no doubt see that by my riveting commentary during our Let's Play of LA Noire that we did way back. But the thing that I definitely sort of interests me about this series is definitely the characters and the art style. The art style is the type of one where it's not necessarily something that someone could like replicate. Like that sort of art style is almost exclusively unique to Danganronpa, and I think the fact that the characters to me look interesting and the concept is also really interesting. I mean, I did technically watch the first season of the Danganronpa anime series, which I thought was a really cool, which I thought was a series that was actually pretty cool. I would like it if the other series were still on Hulu though, but you know what you're gonna do. But yeah, this game is definitely one that seems like it would be great for for us to do a sort of let's play on, especially considering that I would be going into the other few games completely blind, not knowing a thing about them aside from a few of the character designs. But yeah, when that comes out, that's actually going to be a kind of an interesting experiment for me. The next thing that they not necessarily announced, but the next major thing that I would like to talk about is the two new games for the Legend of Zelda franchise. Not necessarily two new games, but it's DLC for one of the previous games, which was the sequel to Hyrule Warriors, which has all the different themes and characters from Breath of the Wild. That game, it looked interesting, but it didn't necessarily feel like something that I would have to necessarily spend like that amount of money on, because it is basically just Hyrule Warriors with the Breath of the Wild feel to it. And if you were a fan of the original Hyrule Warriors, like I was, this game seems like it's going to be more of the same sort of hack and slash style with your favorite Zelda characters. Although I feel like it has doesn't have as much as the charm as the original did, because the original had characters spanning all throughout all of Zelda history, whereas this one is confined in the world of Breath of the Wild, which on its own does have a lot of interesting characters and interesting sort of like mythology and all that, but it feels like it's not going to have the same amount of charm that the original game had. But I could be completely wrong about that, and it could actually be better than the original. But only time will tell if I end up actually feeling interested in getting that game. And with that in mind, the other thing that they had announced, besides the them doing the HD remake of Skyward Sword, which I actually have for the Switch right here, which I actually am having a lot of fun with it, despite the fact that I haven't gotten to the first dungeon yet, and I've had the game for around 2 to 3 days at this point. But the other and final thing that they announced for their E3 was the sequel to Breath of the Wild, Breath of the Wild 2, which, they showed a lot of gameplay and visuals that made it seem like they were adding more to the Breath of the Wild, like, world, because I think one of the things that lots of people took notice of for Breath of the Wild that, they sort of looked past, because it was a new completely open world Zelda game, which was something that people have been wanting for a long time now, is that a lot of the stuff that you do in Breath of the Wild is carried over throughout the entire game. Like, a lot of the stuff that you do during the first half of it are mostly the same things that you're going to be doing throughout until you eventually beat the game. Granted, there were all of the DLC expansions that added a lot more to it, but aside from that, you're still doing the same sort of like going to the different shrines, getting all the artifacts in them, going through the Divine Beast dungeons, quote unquote, encountering all the different cutscenes with Link and Zelda, getting all the different rare weapons, using all the amiibos to see what treasures you get, and all that kind of stuff. A lot of the stuff that you do in Breath of the Wild is repeated throughout the whole game, and I feel like one of the things that they should definitely try to do is give this game, still have it feel like it's Breath of the Wild, but still have a lot of the conventions that they sort of looked over from previous Zelda games. Some major examples are being some of the major, like, mainstay sort of items being ones that are permanently part of your inventory rather than something that you use for a while and then they eventually break and then you have a rare chance of finding the item ever again. Having more traditional style dungeons that aren't just all the different type of shrines and the 4 divine beasts that you go through and solve their like 1 or 2 different puzzles that they have, and then beat the boss, and then that's all there is to it. I feel like having more traditional style Zelda dungeons will still give it that Breath of the Wild feel, but still feel like it's a Zelda game. A lot of people praised Breath of the Wild for, not going through the same sort of conventions that the rest of the series had, but I feel like those type of things that the Zelda games sort of made traditional are some of the reasons why people enjoy the Zelda franchise so much, and I feel like adding those to a game that was already great like Breath of the Wild will make this one even better than the original. So overall, I am definitely excited for all of the games that I've been talking about here. So overall, I do would definitely like to say that they definitely did do a very good job in terms of like showing us stuff that many Nintendo fans and gamer fans in general would be excited over. One thing that I sort of found interesting was that they didn't announce anything Pokemon related, but that's probably because they're probably just going to save all of that for their eventual Pokemon exclusive sort of direct that they're going to do, and that's probably where we're going to hear more news about the Diamond and Pearl remakes and, the Pokemon Legends Arceus, stuff involving, Pokemon Go and a new Pokemon Snap game that came out. They're probably saving all of that stuff for their eventual, Pokemon Direct. So I'm definitely excited to see what they have to announce there. But yeah, overall, I hope you all enjoyed me talking about this year's Nintendo's E3 this year. Again, I really enjoyed it. What did you really enjoy it? What were some of the favorite things that you thought were great? What are some of the things that they could have added to the direct? What stuff could they have not talked about at all during the direct? Go ahead and let me know in the comments section down below. I'd like to hear your overall opinions on it. So until I see you all next time, where I talk about stuff that are outdated just because of the fact that I feel like talking about them, I'm Ben Contreras, and bye.